I found my husband in our living room with my son's fiancée only a few hours before the wedding. I was about to confront him, but a movement in the hallway stopped me. It was my son, Julian. His face was a mask of stone. He looked at me and whispered, "Mom, I already know, and it's so much worse than you think." Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I immerse you in this story, I'd love to know what city you're joining me from. Feel free to share it in the comments. Now let me take you back to the beginning of the day my life shattered. On the morning of my son's wedding, I woke up at 5 a.m. A deep, gnawing anxiety had jolted me from a fitful sleep. I told myself it was just nerves, the kind any mother feels on such an important day. I padded quietly into my home office, the one I'd run my small CPA firm from for the last 15 years. The blue glow of my computer screen illuminated the dark room, the spreadsheets a meaningless blur of numbers. This business, this quiet, practical work, had paid for our son Julian's college and covered the extras that my husband Jonathan's salary never quite reached. It was my contribution, my foundation. But that morning, the numbers meant nothing. My mind was on the patio of our Atlanta estate, a scene I had meticulously curated for months. I could picture the white chairs lined up in perfect rows on the manicured lawn. I could see the arch Jonathan had built, now draped with the rose bushes I had nurtured from tiny, fragile buds. I had checked the string lights myself 3 times, ensuring not a single bulb was out. Every detail, every petal, every note of music had to be perfect. Our son, our Julian, deserved nothing less. 25 years of marriage to Jonathan, 23 years raising Julian. My entire adult life had been dedicated to this family. I was the steady hand, the planner, the silent engine that kept our world turning. Jonathan was the charmer, the charismatic force everyone loved. I was the foundation he leaned on, and for a very long time, that had been enough for me. It felt like a partnership. But lately, a silent, cold distance had settled between us. It was in the way he would suddenly stop talking when I walked into a room, the way his phone was always face down on the table, tilted just away from me. When I'd ask, "Is everything okay, Jonathan?" he would just laugh, a hollow sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Just work, honey," he'd say. "Big promotion on the line, you know how it is." I did know, or I thought I did. You don't just toss 25 years of history overboard because of a gut feeling, do you? You talk yourself out of it. You blame yourself for being paranoid. You choose to believe the lie because the truth is too terrifying to contemplate. The soft click of my office door broke me from my thoughts. It was Julian, standing there in his pajamas, holding a steaming mug of coffee. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under eyes that usually sparkled with his father's charm, but held the quiet practicality I recognized as my own. "Mom," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "You've been up for hours. The wedding isn't until 4. "I just want everything to be perfect for my boy," I said, forcing a cheerful smile as I closed my laptop lid. "Dad's already gone," Julian said, and there was a strange, flat note in his voice that made my skin prickle. "Said he had to run out early to pick up a last-minute gift for Madison's parents." I frowned. "The Ellingtons? That's new. He didn't mention that to me." Julian walked over and sat on the edge of my desk, suddenly looking much younger than his 23 years. "Mom," he began, hesitating, "can I ask you something?" I turned my chair to face him fully. Under the harsh light of my desk lamp, the worry etched on his face was unmistakable. "Anything, sweetie. What's on your mind?" He took a deep, shaky breath, staring into the dark depths of his coffee. Do you think she really loves me?" The question hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Madison, his fiancée, beautiful, ambitious, a young architect from a family whose name was synonymous with old Atlanta money and influence. On paper, she was everything we could have ever wanted for our son. But I'd had my own quiet doubts. I'd seen the way her eyes would sometimes glaze over when Julian talked about his passions, the way she discreetly checked her phone during our family dinners. The signs were there, but I'd chalked them up to pre-wedding stress. "Why would you ask that, honey?" I managed to say, my voice tight. "It's your wedding day." "I know," he mumbled, "and maybe it's just last-minute jitters, but sometimes when she looks at me, I feel like she's looking right through me, like I'm just a box she needed to check on her way to the perfect life." He paused, and the silence in the room grew heavy. "And lately, she's been spending a lot of time with Dad. They're always talking about finances, investments. She says he's mentoring her." A cold trickle of dread traced a path down my spine. I wanted to tell him about the things I had noticed too. How Jonathan's eyes followed Madison around a room. How he was always the first to help her with her coat, to refill her wine glass. How he knew she took her coffee with 2 sugars and a splash of oat milk without ever having to ask. But I bit my tongue. A mother's job is to reassure, not to amplify fear. Instead, I reached out and squeezed his hand. "Wedding jitters are completely normal, sweetie. Marriage is the biggest step you'll ever take." "It's not just jitters, Mom," he said, his voice breaking. He finally looked up at me and his eyes were filled with a pain so raw it terrified me. I think she's in love with someone else." I froze. The air left my lungs. My blood felt like it had turned to ice in my veins. "What makes you say that?" I whispered, barely trusting myself to speak. "Little things," he confessed, his voice dropping to a hushed, agonized tone. "The way she lights up her phone when Dad calls. How she always asks about him first when she comes over. Yesterday, I saw them in the garden just talking, and the way he looked at her. Mom, it wasn't how a father-in-law should look at his son's fiancée. It just wasn't." A hot flush crept up my neck. I forced my voice to stay steady, to be the calm anchor I had always been. "Julian, that's a very serious accusation." "I know," he said, his shoulders slumping in defeat, "and I hope I'm wrong. God, I hope I'm wrong." Before I could form a reply, the door swung open again. It was Jonathan. He was already dressed in an impeccable button-down shirt and dress slacks, looking as composed and handsome as ever. "Well, look at my 2 favorite people," he exclaimed, his voice too loud, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. He seemed genuinely startled to see Julian there. "Big day, son. You should be getting your beauty rest." He then turned his polished charm on me. "And you, Laura, you're going to wear yourself out before the guests even arrive. Madison just called. She's coming by around 10 to discuss some last-minute seating chart details." I watched Julian's expression tighten, his jaw clenching. "What seating chart details?" he asked, his voice flat. "Oh, you know," Jonathan said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Just making sure her parents aren't seated next to your Uncle Robert after that heated political debate last Christmas. You know how particular her family can be. We should discuss it privately because of the politics and all that." "Of course," Julian said, his tone dripping with a sarcasm so subtle I doubt his father even registered it. "We can't have the wrong people sitting together." The tension in the room was so thick it was suffocating. I watched my husband and my son, these 2 pillars of my life, and a deep, primal knowing settled in my soul. Julian wasn't wrong. Something was terribly, horribly wrong in my home. You think you know the people you love, but what happens when you discover their love is just a performance? After Jonathan and Julian left my office, a cold, gripping dread seized me. I was supposed to have a final call with the caterer at 10:30 a.m., a call I had meticulously scheduled for weeks. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling so slightly I hoped it wasn't audible, and I called them. I lied. I told them a family emergency had come up and I needed to reschedule. The truth was, I had cleared my entire morning. I couldn't shake Julian's words, nor the nauseating feeling that Jonathan's false cheer had provoked. Something was happening in my house on my son's wedding day, and for the first time in 25 years, the steady, predictable Laura was going to find out what it was. I spent the next 2 hours in a fugue state, pretending to be busy. I wiped down the already spotless kitchen counters. I rearranged the floral centerpieces on the dining room table for the 3rd time. Every creak of the floorboards, every passing car made my heart hammer against my ribs. I was an actress in a play, performing the role of the happy mother of the groom, while inside, I was twisting myself into knots of silent, screaming anxiety. At exactly 10 a.m., a sleek white BMW pulled into our driveway. Madison's car. I watched from the kitchen window as she stepped out, looking effortlessly chic in simple jeans and a silk blouse. She moved with the innate confidence of someone who has never had to question her place in the world. She walked up to our front door as if she already owned it. My heart was beating so loudly I could hear the pulse whooshing in my ears. This was it. I had to know. I crept out the back door, my skin crawling with a mixture of shame and desperation. I circled the house, crouching low behind the large hydrangea bushes I had so painstakingly planted and nurtured, the very bushes that were supposed to provide a beautiful backdrop for wedding photos. Now they were my hiding place, my camouflage for the destruction of my family. Through the large bay window, I had a perfect, horrifying view of our living room. Jonathan had let her in, and they were standing by the fireplace, the spot where we took our family Christmas photo every single year. He was pouring her a glass of wine. I couldn't hear their words, but I didn't need to. Their body language was a script of betrayal. They stood too close. His hand rested on the small of her back. It was a casual, possessive gesture that lingered for a second too long. A silent declaration of intimacy that had no place between a father-in-law and his son's bride. I clenched my hands into fists, my nails digging half-moons into my palms. 25 years. We had built a life in this house. We had read bedtime stories to Julian on that very sofa. We had hosted countless parties, celebrated anniversaries, comforted each other through loss in that room. And now my husband was standing there, his hand on another woman, my son's fiancée, on the day they were supposed to vow their lives to each other. A red-hot fury surged through me. I was about to stand up, to storm in there and confront them. I didn't care about the scene. I didn't care about the wedding. I only cared about the scorching, visceral betrayal unfolding before my eyes. But then I saw it. A movement. A shadow in the reflection of the glass. I looked closer, my blood running cold. It was Julian. He was standing at the top of the stairs, hidden in the shadows, watching them too. The sight of him, so still and utterly broken, stopped me cold. This wasn't just my pain, it was his. And his pain was a far greater deterrent than my own rage. Downstairs, the scene had escalated. Madison's hand was now on Jonathan's chest. She leaned into him, her head tilted back, a coy, intimate smile playing on her lips. She said something, and he laughed. It was a sound I hadn't heard from him in years. Light, genuine, happy. The way he used to laugh with me when we were young and the world was full of possibility. In that moment, I saw my husband come alive in a way he hadn't been with me for a very, very long time. Then his hands were in her hair, and they were kissing. It wasn't a chaste peck. It was a deep, hungry, passionate kiss, the kind you see in movies, the kind that leaves no room for interpretation. My vision tunneled, tinged with red. A deafening roar filled my ears. I took a stumbling step toward the house, ready to rip the door from its hinges, ready to scream until my voice was gone. And then a hand gripped my arm, firm and urgent. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. It was Julian. He had slipped out of the house and come to find me. His face was a pale, ashen mask, but his eyes burned with a cold, hard fire I had never seen in him before. "Mom," he whispered, his voice strained, tight with a pain that was unbearable to hear. "Don't. Not yet. This is... I choked on the words, the truth too vile to speak aloud. I know what it is, he said. His voice was eerily steady, a stark contrast to the tremor I could see in his hands. Mom, I've known for weeks. Weeks? The word came out as a strangled whisper. I stared at my son, the boy I had raised, who now looked at me with the eyes of a man who had seen the very worst of the world. We were still crouched in the dirt, hidden by the beautiful blooming hydrangeas. Inside, my husband and my son's fiancée had moved from the fireplace to the sofa. I couldn't bear to look. I didn't want to believe it at first, Julian said, his voice low and urgent. I kept making excuses for them. He's just being kind. She's just nervous about joining the family. But it kept happening. The lingering looks, the private conversations that stopped when I walked in, the way Madison lit up whenever he was near. He corrected himself, a slip that was a painful dagger to my heart. She was supposed to be gaining a mother, not a rival. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice shaking with a mixture of shock and a fierce, protective rage. You shouldn't have had to carry this alone. Because I needed proof, he said, his jaw clenching so tight I could see the muscle twitch. And because he looked at me, his eyes decades older than his 23 years. I wanted to give them enough rope to hang themselves with. He pulled his phone from his pocket. His hands, though shaking, moved with a determined precision. I hired someone, Mom. What did you do? A cold dread, different from the hot anger, began to seep into my bones. I'm not stupid, Mom, he said, a grim finality in his tone. After I saw them having lunch together a month ago, a lunch Dad told me was a business meeting and she told me was a shopping trip with her girlfriends, I knew I wasn't crazy. I needed the truth. He unlocked his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and handed it to me. I hired a private investigator. My breath hitched in my chest. Julian, the money... Don't worry about the money. He cut me off, his voice like steel. It was worth every single cent. The first photo on the screen loaded. It was a high-resolution image of Jonathan and Madison walking into the St. Regis Atlanta downtown. The timestamp in the corner read a Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks ago, an afternoon Jonathan had told me he was at an all-day regional sales conference. The second photo showed them leaving together 2 hours later, their clothes slightly disheveled, their faces flushed and satisfied. There are 17 different occasions, Julian said quietly, his voice hollow, as I slowly, painfully scrolled through a digital gallery of our family's betrayal. Photos of them in dimly lit restaurant booths across the city. Photos of them pressed up against Jonathan's car in a deserted parking garage. Photos of them laughing, holding hands, living a completely separate, clandestine life while I was at home balancing spreadsheets and planning our future. The sheer scale of the deceit was breathtaking. This wasn't a one-time mistake, a moment of drunken weakness. It was a calculated, long-term affair, a second life built on the ruins of ours. A fresh, cleansing wave of pure, unadulterated rage washed over me, burning away the shock and the dread. I stood up, my body thrumming with a new, terrifying purpose. We're stopping this, I said, my voice like cold-forged steel. Right now. The wedding is off. No. Julian's voice was sharp, commanding, making me crouch back down instinctively. Mom, trust me, I have a plan. A plan? I hissed, the word tasting absurd. Elijah, this is insane. We can't just let the wedding... Absolutely we can, he cut in, his voice ringing with an authority I had never heard from him before. And we will. Mom, think about it. If we confront them now, what happens? They'll deny it. They'll twist it. Dad will say you're being hysterical, that you're misinterpreting a comforting hug. Madison will cry and play the devastated victim. They'll turn it all back on us, make us look like the unstable ones trying to ruin their perfect day. He was right. I could already hear Jonathan's smooth, placating voice. Laura, you're overreacting. She's a nervous young woman, and I was just offering some paternal support. Your imagination is running wild. "So what do you suggest?" I whispered, my anger giving way to a cold, terrifying clarity. Julian's smile was something new, something chilling and utterly unfamiliar on the face of my gentle son. "Public humiliation," he said, the words hanging in the thick Georgia air between us. "Total and absolute destruction of their reputations, legal consequences. We don't just end this, Mom. We make sure they can never, ever do this to anyone again." I looked at my son. When had he become so calculating, so ruthless? Then I looked back through the window. I saw my husband, the man I had loved and trusted for a quarter of a century, begin to unbutton Madison's blouse on the very sofa where we had built our family. And in that moment, the woman I used to be, the understanding wife, the forgiving partner, the steady foundation, died. She died right there in the rich, dark soil behind the beautiful, blooming flowers she had so painstakingly planted. I turned back to my son, my eyes dry, my soul encased in ice. "Tell me the plan," I said. "Your engagement helps others find this community. If this story resonates, please like the video, subscribe for more raw truths, and let me know your thoughts with a comment." "Tell me the plan," I said. And in that moment, crouched in the dirt, I felt a seismic shift inside me. The foundation of my life was gone, but in its place was something new, a cold, hard resolve. Julian's eyes locked with mine. "We let the wedding happen." The words were so absurd I almost laughed. "What, Julian? No, I am not letting that woman stand at an altar and make a mockery of my son, of our family." "She won't be making a mockery of us, Mom. She'll be making a mockery of herself in front of everyone." He glanced back toward the window, his face a mask of contempt. "They think they're so clever. They think they've gotten away with it. So we let them get all the way to the finish line. We let them stand in front of 300 people, believing they've won. And then we pull the rug out from under their entire world." The ruthlessness of it took my breath away. This wasn't my gentle, bookish son. This was a strategist. How? "We need more than just these photos," he said, tapping his phone. "We need irrefutable proof, the kind they can't talk their way out of. And we need to know the full extent of it. This," he gestured toward the house, "this is just the surface. I can feel it." He was right. The affair was a cancer, but I knew, deep in my gut, that it was just a symptom of a much deeper sickness in my marriage. The most dangerous person is the one who has nothing left to lose, and I had just lost everything. We slipped back into the house like ghosts. The rest of that day was a master class in acting. I smiled. I nodded. I discussed canapés with the wedding planner. I even helped Jonathan pick out his tie for the ceremony, my fingers brushing against his neck, imagining the feel of silk tightening around it. Every polite word was a lie. Every smile felt like a crack in my soul. Franklin was in his element, the proud father, the gracious host. He talked about his speech, about how proud he was of Julian, about the bright future ahead. The hypocrisy was so thick, I felt I was breathing poison. That night, after Jonathan had fallen into a smug, satisfied sleep, I met Julian in my home office. The door was locked, the blinds drawn. The desk where I usually balanced ledgers was now a war room. On it lay the beginnings of a file that would end my marriage. "Tell me about the detective," I said, my voice steady as I picked up a surveillance photo of Jonathan and Madison entering the hotel. It turned my stomach, but I forced myself to look. "Her name is Anya," Julian said. "Anya Petrova." The name hit me like a physical blow. Anya, my cousin. Anya. Julian saw my recognition and nodded. I didn't know who else to trust. I knew she was a detective with the police force for 20 years before she retired and started her own agency. I knew she was smart, relentless, and discreet. He looked a little sheepish. I also knew she never really liked Dad. A short, sharp laugh escaped me, sounding more like a sob. My cousin Anya. We'd been close as girls, but life had pulled us in different directions. I hadn't told her about the growing distance with Jonathan, pride, shame, the usual culprits. "I'll call her," I said, my voice thick. I picked up my phone. It was past midnight. She answered on the second ring, her voice raspy with sleep but alert. "Laura, it's late. Is everything okay?" "No, Anya," I said, the dam finally breaking. "Nothing is okay." And I told her everything. Julian's suspicions, the horrifying scene we had witnessed that morning, the photos. I cried then. Ugly, choked sobs that I had been holding back all day. I cried for my son, for myself, for the life I thought I had. Anya listened. There was no shock, no dramatic gasp, just a grim, professional acceptance. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. "I'm not surprised, Laura," she said quietly, her voice firm. "I've seen the way he looks at that girl. I was at the 4th of July barbecue. I saw it. I was hoping I was wrong for your sake." "Julian told me about the photos," I said, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand, forcing my voice back to business. "What else do you have?" "More than you probably want to know," she said, her tone shifting into that of an investigator. "I've been tracking them for 3 weeks. They meet twice a week like clockwork at the St. Regis. He always pays in cash. They have lunch at places he's never taken you. Last week it was Carbone." A fresh flash of rage. Our money. The money I managed so carefully from my small business. The money for our retirement, for our future. He was spending it on hotel rooms and overpriced pasta for his mistress. "And Laura," Anya continued, her voice dropping, "there's more now, something bigger. I've been digging into Jonathan's financials trying to find the source of all this cash." My blood ran cold. "What did you find?" A long, heavy pause. "It's not just Madison," she said, the words landing like a sledgehammer. "It's not the first time." I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to tilt. "I found a series of regular payments," she continued, "monthly, going back 15 years, always to the same person, a woman named Clara Roberts." The name meant nothing. It was just a name, a ghost. "Who is she?" "She was a junior analyst at his old firm when Julian was a child. She left the city abruptly about 15 years ago. The payment started a few months after she left." Anya took a deep breath and I braced myself for the impact. "Laura. She has a daughter, a 15-year-old girl named Zoe." The phone slipped in my sweaty hand. I fumbled to catch it. A daughter, an entire other child, 15 years. 15 years of lies. The secret business trips, the unexplained expenses, the emotional absence. It all clicked into a horrifying, soul-crushing clarity. "I have to know for sure, Anya," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I know," she said softly. "I'll handle it. But Laura, you have to be prepared. When this drops, it's not a scandal, it's a nuclear bomb." I looked over at Julian, who was watching me, his face pale but determined. He didn't know this part yet. He only knew about Madison. "How do you tell your son his father has another child?" "I know," I said, my voice suddenly cold and hard, all emotion freezing into a solid core of purpose. "That's exactly what we're counting on." The next 24 hours were a blur of calculated deception. I moved through the wedding preparations like a ghost. I smiled at relatives. I approved the final floral arrangements. I hugged Madison's mother and told her how excited I was to finally be family. I was a shell, going through the motions while my mind raced a million miles an hour. Anya worked fast. She was a professional, and this was now personal. "It's risky, Laura," she told me when we met in my car, the only place we could talk safely. "But if we can get a clean DNA sample from Jonathan, I can get a preliminary, non-legal comparison to a sample from the girl." That night, after Jonathan fell asleep, I crept into our bathroom. My heart pounded with every creak of the floorboard. I stood there, looking at his toothbrush in the holder. It felt like the ultimate violation, a line I never imagined I would cross. But what was this compared to the violations he had committed? I took it, my hand shaking, and sealed it in a plastic bag. I left it in the mailbox for Anya to collect before dawn. The day of the wedding, as the house buzzed with chaotic, joyful energy, Anya called. "I've got more on the money," she said, her voice grim. "It's worse than we thought." We met in my car again, parked a block away. She opened her laptop. On the screen was a spreadsheet, a dizzying array of numbers. "I did a full forensic analysis of your joint accounts, your retirement funds, everything," she said, pointing to a highlighted column. "Look, for years, Jonathan has been making regular cash withdrawals. 500 here, 700 there, never more than 1,000 at a time, always from different ATMs. "I thought it was for his hobby," I stammered, feeling stupid, naive. "He told me he was investing in rare coins, something that required discrete cash transactions." "Another lie," Anya said dryly. "His hobby was named Madison, but that's not the worst part." She clicked another tab. The screen filled with loan documents. "He's been taking loans out against your pension plan." I stared, uncomprehending for a moment. Then the numbers came into focus. A series of loans, taken out against the retirement account I had so diligently contributed to from my business, the account that was our safety net. He had drained almost $80,000 in the last 18 months. "How?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "He would have needed my signature." Anya zoomed in on a signature line. "He forged it, Laura. I compared it to your signature on your last 10 tax returns. It's a good forgery, but it's not yours." A wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to grip the steering wheel. This was beyond betrayal. This was theft. This was financial rape. He wasn't just breaking my heart. He was systematically dismantling my future piece by piece to fund his sordid affair. He was gambling with my entire financial security, with the life we were supposed to share. He wasn't just a cheater, he was a criminal. "And Madison?" I asked, my voice hollow. "She's not an innocent victim," Anya said, her gaze hard. "I'll get to her, but first, there's this." She hesitated, then handed me a large manila envelope. "The preliminary DNA results came back this morning." My hands shook so badly I could barely open the clasp. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. I scanned the scientific jargon until my eyes landed on the conclusion at the bottom. Probability of paternity, 99%. I stared at the words until they were burned into my retinas. Zoe Roberts was Jonathan's daughter. 15 years. For 15 years, I had loved him, trusted him, built a life with him, while he had another daughter, another family, hidden in the shadows. I rested my forehead against the cool leather of the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. A strange, terrifying calm settled over me. The pain was still there, a gaping, bleeding wound in my chest, but now it was accompanied by something else, a cold, hard, unshakable resolve. He wasn't just going to lose his wife, he was going to lose everything. This story is built on your support. If you're with me, please show the algorithm by liking this video and subscribing. Your engagement ensures these truths reach others who need to hear them. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Sitting in the car with that flimsy piece of paper in my hand, it felt heavier than a tombstone. It was the death certificate of my marriage, of the life I thought I had, a 15-year-old daughter. The words echoed in the silence, shredding the last remnants of my old reality. "How?" I finally managed to ask Anya, my voice sounding distant and strange. "How did you find her?" Her expression was a mix of pity and professional resolve. "It started with the payments. Once I had Clara Roberts' name, it wasn't hard. She lives in Marietta, Laura, about 20 miles away." 20 miles. For 15 years, he had been living a secret life a short drive away. How many late nights at the office? How many weekend golf trips? My mind spun, mentally reviewing 2 decades of excuses, each one now taking on a new, sinister meaning. I did a drive-by yesterday morning, Anya continued, her voice soft. I posed as a lost delivery driver. Clara opened the door, and behind her, I saw the girl, Zoe. She paused, letting the name hang in the air. Laura, she's the spitting image of him. The same dark, intelligent eyes, the same smile. It's unmistakable. I squeezed my eyes shut, picturing it. An innocent teenager, caught in this web who looked just like my husband, a sister my son never knew he had. The cruelty of it was so profound, it was almost abstract. My family wasn't just broken, it was a fiction, a carefully constructed lie I had unknowingly helped maintain. Does the mother, Clara, know about me? About Julian? I asked. I can't say for sure, Anya admitted, but the way she lives, a nice house in a good school district, but no high-profile career, it's clear Jonathan is her primary source of support. She has every reason to keep the secret. He wasn't just paying child support, he was funding her entire life. With my money, the money from my consulting, our joint savings, the funds he had stolen from our retirement. The betrayal was a bottomless pit. I handed the DNA report back to Anya, my movements robotic. Put it with the rest, I said, my voice stripped of all emotion. The shock was so total it had short-circuited my ability to feel anything but a cold, heavy emptiness. The moment you discover the truth, you can never go back to the comfort of the lie, and part of you will mourn that comfort. And Madison? I asked, needing to latch onto a target for the anger that was starting to thaw the ice in my veins. You said there was more. Anya's expression hardened. Right, Madison. She turned the laptop back to me, opening a new file filled with bank statements and invoices. She's not just sleeping with your husband, she's been embezzling from her architecture firm. The words took a moment to register. She's a junior partner, Anya explained, pointing to doctored expense reports. She's been inflating client billing, creating fake invoices for non-existent contractors, and siphoning the money into a private account. It's not huge amounts each time, but it's steady. Over the last year, she's stolen over $150,000. I gasped. $150,000? And I can trace some of that money directly to gifts for Jonathan, Anya said, her voice dripping with contempt as she showed me a transfer followed by a credit card charge for a $3,000 watch. She was stealing from her partners to buy gifts for her lover, who was stealing from his wife to buy gifts for her. It's the most perfectly disgusting circle of deceit I've ever seen. So Madison wasn't just a homewrecker, she was a criminal, a thief, and she was about to marry my son, bringing her corruption into the heart of my family. The numbness vanished, replaced by a white-hot, cleansing fury. This was no longer just about a broken heart. This was about justice. This was about protecting my son. Okay, I said, my voice low and steady, looking my cousin in the eye. The wedding plan, let's go over it one more time. I want it to be perfect. The knowledge of Madison's crime finalized everything. This was no longer a messy domestic drama. It was a conspiracy of fraud, a house of cards built by 2 people who deserved to watch it fall in front of everyone they had ever tried to impress. The final hours before the ceremony were the most surreal of my life. I went home and resumed my role. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching a movie of my own life. I laughed with cousins, complimented dresses, assured the caterer everything was wonderful. Inside, I was a coil of tension, but outside, I was the picture of maternal pride. Jonathan was in his element, smiling, shaking hands, the proud patriarch. He pulled me aside, his arm around my waist, his voice a low murmur in my ear. "You look beautiful, Laura. Isn't it a perfect day?" I looked into his eyes, the eyes of the man I had loved for half my life, and felt nothing but a vast, desolate emptiness. I smiled back. A perfect day. Julian was a mirror of my composure. He greeted his friends, posed for photos, played his part. But every time our eyes met, I saw the same steel resolve. We were soldiers waiting for the signal. Anya had arrived early, disguised as an AV technician. Her equipment was hooked up to the large projection screen we'd rented for the sentimental slideshow. No one suspected a thing. She had a small remote in her pocket. One button was all it would take. I had my own role. In my clutch purse, next with a tissue and lipstick, was a sealed envelope containing divorce papers, already signed and notarized. I also had a flash drive with copies of every piece of evidence Anya had gathered. One way or another, my marriage would end today. At 4:05 p.m., I took my seat in the front row. The string quartet began to play. White chairs stretched out on the lawn under a flawless Georgia sky. Franklin sat beside me, squeezing my hand. I didn't pull away. Madison appeared at the end of the aisle, a vision in white lace. She looked radiant, beautiful, and utterly fraudulent. She smiled at the crowd, then her eyes found Jonathan. For a split second, a look passed between them, a look of shared secrets, of triumphant conspiracy. They thought they had won. Julian stood at the altar, his face an unreadable mask. When Madison joined him, he took her hand. His expression never wavered. He looked out at the crowd, his eyes scanning until they landed on mine. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was time. The officiant began. Words about love, commitment, and fidelity washed over the crowd, each one a grotesque parody. I wondered if Jonathan and Madison were even listening, or if they were already planning their next secret rendezvous. They exchanged vows they didn't mean, promises they had already broken 100 times over. My stomach churned. Finally, the officiant smiled benevolently. If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. A reverent silence fell over the 300 guests. This was the moment. My heart hammered against my ribs. I could feel everyone's eyes on us, waiting for the happy mother to beam, for the proud father to nod. I took a slow, deliberate breath, and then I stood up. The moment I rose, a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The air, filled with music and birdsong, became thick and silent. Every head turned toward me. Jonathan went rigid beside me. "Laura," he hissed, his grip tightening on my arm. "What are you doing? Sit down, you're making a scene." I shook his hand off as if it were a diseased thing. My eyes were fixed on my son at the altar, whose face was pale but resolute. Then I looked at Madison, whose radiant smile had frozen into a mask of confused horror. "I'm sorry, everyone," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying across the silent garden. I apologize for the interruption, but I believe the officiant asked if there was any reason this marriage should not proceed. I paused, letting the weight of the silence press down. And yes, I do. I have a reason. A wave of murmuring swept through the crowd. I saw Madison's father, Judge Ellington, begin to rise, his face thunderous. "Laura, what is the meaning of this?" "The meaning, Your Honor," I said, turning to face him, my voice cold and formal, "is that your daughter is about to marry my son under profoundly false pretenses, and I believe you and everyone else here deserves to know the truth." I pulled the small remote from my purse. My thumb hovered over the single red button. "The truth?" Jonathan sputtered, his face flushing crimson. "Laura, you've lost your mind. You're embarrassing our family." "Am I, Jonathan?" I asked, my voice dropping to an icy calm as I turned my gaze to him. "You're the one who has shamed this family, you and your mistress." With that, I pressed the button. Behind the altar, the large screen sprang to life. The first image was the crisp, high-resolution surveillance photo of Jonathan and Madison locked in that passionate kiss in our living room. The one from yesterday morning. The crowd erupted. Gasps, screams, people standing up. "But that's not all," I continued, my voice rising above the chaos. This wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. The screen changed. A collage of their secret meetings at the St. Regis, their clandestine lunches, their lies laid bare for all to see. Madison was stammering denials, her voice lost in the uproar. Jonathan was on his feet, shouting, "This is fake! Photoshopped! She's having a breakdown!" "Am I?" I asked quietly. "Then perhaps you can explain this." The screen changed again, this time to bank statements. I pointed out the cash withdrawals, the forged signatures on the pension loan documents. A receipt for a $15,000 necklace from Cartier flashed on the screen, followed by a photo of Madison wearing that same necklace. The crowd's noise began to subside, replaced by a stunned, horrified silence. This was no longer just a cheating scandal. It was financial. It was criminal. "My husband has been systematically stealing from our family to fund his affair," I announced, "and his fiancée, the woman about to marry my son, has also been busy." The next slide showed the evidence of Madison's embezzlement, the fake invoices, the bank transfers. I saw her law partners in the audience, their faces shifting from confusion to pure, unadulterated fury. "But the deepest betrayal," I said, my voice trembling with 15 years of repressed pain, "the true heart of the deceit that has defined my marriage is that my husband's lies didn't start with Madison." The DNA test results filled the screen. The words, "probability of paternity," 99.99% were displayed in huge, bold letters. Below it was the photo Anya had provided of a smiling 15-year-old girl. "This is Zoe Roberts," I said, the name echoing in the absolute silence. "She is Jonathan's daughter, a daughter he has kept hidden from me and from his own son for her entire life." The silence that followed was deafening. 300 people stared at the evidence of a betrayal so complete, so devastating it was beyond comprehension. And in that perfect, terrible silence, I watched the world I had known for 25 years burn to the ground. This story is built on a foundation of truth. If it resonates with you, please support the channel by liking and subscribing. Your engagement tells the algorithm that these narratives matter. Share your strength in the comments below. The silence was broken by a single sharp sob. It came from Madison, who staggered as if struck, her face a ghastly white against her wedding dress. Then she collapsed onto the ground in a heap of lace and shattered delusion. That sound broke the spell. The garden erupted into pure, unadulterated chaos. People were yelling, pointing, pulling out their phones. Madison's mother ran to her fallen daughter, wailing. Her father, the judge, stood frozen, a monument to utter humiliation. Jonathan just stood there, his face a kaleidoscope of rage, panic, and dawning horror. He looked from the screen to me, to the stunned faces of his friends and colleagues. He was trapped. There were no lies left, no smooth words. His carefully constructed world had been publicly and irrevocably demolished. Then the coward did the only thing he could. He ran. He bolted, shoving his way through the stunned crowd, knocking over a tray of champagne flutes that shattered on the stone patio. He was literally fleeing the scene of his own life's implosion. But Anya was waiting. My cousin, still in her technician's vest, stepped out from behind a large oak tree. As Jonathan ran past, she stuck out her foot. It was a perfectly executed trip. He fell hard, hitting the manicured lawn with a grunt, sliding in his expensive suit. "Going somewhere, Jonathan?" Anya asked, her voice casual as she walked over to where he lay, sprawled and gasping. By then, Julian had left the altar and was beside me, his arm firm around my shoulders. "It's over, Mom," he whispered. But it wasn't. Not quite. Madison was back on her feet, supported by her sobbing mother, and she pointed a shaking, accusatory finger at me. "You!" she shrieked, her voice hysterical. "You planned this! You planned this whole thing to ruin me!" "No, Madison," Julian said, his voice cold and clear, cutting through her noise. "You ruined your own life, you and him." He didn't even look at his father. We just handed you the shovel." "Let go of me," Jonathan demanded, trying to pull his arm from Anya's firm grasp. "Can't do that, John," Anya said. "You see, I'm a licensed investigator, and I have reason to believe you've committed multiple felonies, including forgery and financial fraud. But don't worry," she added, looking over her shoulder. "We're not here for you right now." Two uniformed police officers were walking calmly through the parting crowd. They weren't here for Jonathan's crimes. That would be for the civil courts and my lawyer. They were here for Madison. "Madison Ellington?" one officer asked, his voice quiet but authoritative. Her eyes went wide with pure terror. "No. You are under arrest on suspicion of embezzlement and wire fraud." The click of the handcuffs closing around her wrists was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I saw her face crumble, the final devastating realization that this was not just public humiliation. This was real. There were going to be real, life-altering consequences. Her life, as she knew it, was over. As the police led a sobbing Madison away, her parents watched in stunned horror. The wedding photographers hired to capture a fairy tale were now documenting the fall of a dynasty. The crowd began to disperse, some in tears, some in hushed, excited whispers. In the midst of the chaos, I finally felt the last of my strength leave me. I leaned into Julian. The performance was over. Sometimes closure isn't a gentle turning of the page. It's the violent end of one story so a new one can finally begin. The next few weeks were a painful public ordeal. The story was a media feast. Wedding day arrest. Fiancée's secret life. Groom's father's love child. Our names and faces were everywhere. I stopped answering the phone. My small CPA firm bled clients. The shame was a blanket smothering me, even though I knew, intellectually, I had nothing to be ashamed of. The day after the wedding, I did what I had planned. I walked into my lawyer's office with the signed divorce papers and the flash drive of evidence. With the mountain of proof, Jonathan didn't fight. The legal process was swift and brutal. In the settlement, I got the house and a significant portion of his remaining assets as restitution for the stolen pension funds. It wasn't a victory, it was salvage. Madison, facing overwhelming evidence, took a plea deal. She was sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security prison and ordered to repay every cent. Her family's reputation was in tatters. Jonathan's fall was quieter but complete. He lost his job, his friends, and any shred of respect. He moved into a small apartment, a ghost. But the most complicated part was Zoe. 2 weeks after the wedding, I received a letter. It was from Clara Roberts. It was short, direct, and devoid of malice. She apologized for the pain her past relationship with Jonathan had caused and said her daughter had learned the truth from the news and wanted to meet Julian and me. I sat with that letter for 3 days. What was I supposed to do? This girl was the living proof of my husband's greatest betrayal, but she was also an innocent. She was my son's sister. I showed the letter to Julian. He read it, his face grim. "I want to meet her," he said immediately. "She's my sister, Mom. She deserves to know she has a family or what's left of it." So I made the call. We agreed to meet at a quiet coffee shop in a neutral town. I was terrified. As we waited, I twisted a napkin in my hands until it was a frayed mess. Then they walked in. Clara was an ordinary, tired-looking woman who seemed to carry the weight of her secrets in the slump of her shoulders. And behind her was Zoe. The moment I saw her, my breath caught. Anya was right. She had Jonathan's eyes, the same dark, intelligent eyes that had made me fall for him a lifetime ago. She looked scared, clutching a book to her chest like a shield. And in that moment, looking at this innocent girl who was as much a victim as I was, I knew my anger was not for her. It was for him. Always him. That first meeting was awkward, filled with clumsy words. Julian, bless him, did most of the talking. He asked her about school, about the book she was holding. He treated her like a person. a sister he was meeting for the first time. I mostly watched, trying to reconcile this shy, sweet girl with the monumental lie she represented. Slowly, tentatively, we began to build something new. We met for coffee, then lunch. Julian and Zoe started texting, discovering a shared love for science fiction and terrible puns. I found myself looking forward to seeing her. She was bright, funny, and carried a kindness that felt untouched by the drama that surrounded her origin. She was an innocent soul caught in the wreckage of our parents' choices. A year passed. The divorce was finalized. The media storm subsided. I sold the large family home, its rooms too full of ghosts, and bought a smaller, sun-filled townhouse. It was quiet. It was peaceful. It was mine. Julian, after months of therapy, was thriving. He'd left his corporate job and gone back to school for landscape architecture. He was creating beauty out of chaos, a fitting metaphor. He was dating a lovely, genuine woman who looked at him like he hung the moon. And Zoe, she had become a part of our lives. She came for dinner every other Sunday. She and Elijah had a real sibling bond, teasing and talking for hours. I felt a fierce, protective love for her. She was no longer a symbol of betrayal. She was just Zoe, my son's sister, a strange, unexpected, but cherished part of my new, honest family. One evening, about a year after the wedding that wasn't, my doorbell rang. It was Jonathan. I hadn't seen or spoken to him since he fled the reception. He looked diminished, older, the arrogant charm utterly gone, replaced by a deep weariness. He asked if he could come in. I hesitated, then stood aside. He told me he was in therapy. He said he was trying to understand the why. He apologized. He said he was sorry for the lies, for the betrayal, for the pain he had caused me, Julian, and Zoe. He meant it. I could see that he did. But an apology is a pebble thrown into a canyon after the avalanche has already happened. I forgive you, Jonathan, I said, and I was surprised to find I actually meant it. Not for you, for me. I can't carry that anger anymore. It's too heavy. I looked him directly in the eye, my gaze steady. But I will never trust you again. We can never go back. He nodded, a sheen of tears in his eyes. I know, he whispered. And then he left. That night, as I got ready for bed in my quiet, peaceful home, I thought about the woman I was a year ago, crouched in the dirt behind the hydrangeas. She was so broken, so lost. I wished I could go back and tell her that the pain wasn't the end of the story. The family I thought I had was a beautiful lie. It shattered into a million pieces on that sunny afternoon. But what Julian, Zoe, and I built in its place is smaller, quieter, and imperfect. It's built not on comfortable lies, but on a difficult, painful, and ultimately freeing truth. We'd lost everything, but in doing so, we had finally found something real. And for the first time in a long, long time, that felt like more than enough. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've been through something similar, or if any part of this has resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Your stories matter. If you'd like to hear more truths like this, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Be kind to yourselves, and I'll see you next time.